The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. As scheduled, today the Chamber is hearing TCW 384. Mr. Dao An San is now directed to report to the Chamber on the status of the parties to the proceedings today. Dao An San. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. All parties to the proceedings today are present, except Mr. Nuon Chia, who is present in his holding cell downstairs. And this is based on the decision by the trial chamber, and he is permitted to observe the proceedings from there due to his health concerns. Today, the chamber is hearing TCW 384, who has already taken the oath. The witness took the oath this morning, and according to the witness' knowledge, the witness is not in a relationship with the two accused persons, Mr. Nuon Chia and Khieu Sompon, or any civil party admitted in this case file. The witness will be assisted by Mr. Moon Savan, the jury counsel, and today there is no reserve witness. Thank you, Mr. President. The President, thank you, Mr. Dao An San. Court officer is now directed to call TCW 384, please. The President, good morning, Mr. Witness. What is your name, please? Response: I am Leng Cheung. Question: Mr. Leng Cheung, how old are you? Response: I am 50 years old. Question: where do you live? Response: I live in Sampolun district of Battambang province. Question: what are your parents' names? Response: my father is Cheng Duong, my mother is Un On. Question: what's your wife's names and how many children do you have? Response: my wife is Hut Ri and we have 3 children. Question: thank you, Mr. Leng Chung, according to the report just presented by the court officer that you are not in a relationship with the accused or a civil party in this case file, and that you already took the oath this morning before you appeared before this chamber. Is that correct? Response: yes, it is, Mr. President. The President, now the chamber would like to proceed to inform you of your rights. We would like to notify you of your right under Rule 28, right against self-incrimination of witnesses. As a witness, you may object to making any statement that might tend to incriminate you. In other words, you have the right not to incriminate yourself, and you are to respond to questions. And to ensure that you can exercise your right, we coordinate with the Westsu unit to make sure that a jury counsel is assigned to assist you, who is now sitting next to you. He will be ready to discuss this with you. For example, if you feel that your responses would be self-incriminating. And furthermore, as the witness, you are to give or respond to all the questions put to you by the bench and parties to the proceedings. And indeed, the responses have to be made from you, except those that you feel are self-incriminating. And as the witness, you shall speak the truth or tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And this truth must be relevant to the accounts you have experienced during the events. Mr. Ling Chung, have you ever given any interviews to the co-investigators of the tribunal during the last few years? Response: yes, I have. I gave interview to these people in 2009 at my home. The President, on how many occasions did you give such interviews? Response: it was on one occasion only. The President: thank you. Before you appear before this chamber, have you read or reviewed the accounts of your interview you once gave to the investigators to refresh your memory? Response: I'm afraid I haven't read the detail of the statement, but I have browsed it briefly. The President, we take that you have read it briefly. According to your brief review of the statement, are you convinced that the statement is still consistent with the accounts you provided back then? Response: some are consistent, some are not, I believe, because I do not remember this precisely now. It took place long ago. The President, thank you, Mr. Witness. For the questioning of this witness, the Chamber would like to hand over to counsels for Mr. Kyusompon to put questions to the witness before the other parties to the proceeding. Counsels for Mr. Kyusompon and counsels for Mr. Nunji will have half day for questioning.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning to the Chamber and the parties. In accordance with Memo 288, I believe that the co-prosecutors should start the questioning of this witness. That is what the text seems to say in paragraph 6. That's the programming that was set down. So I will stand corrected by the parties if I am wrong, but it seems to me that that is what has been planned. Thank you.
The President, thank you. We would like to hear from the prosecution, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have the memo that the defense is referring to before me, but I think the practice is well established. Considering that this witness was called by the defense of Kyusompon, it would be logical for them to begin, us to continue, and for us to close with the civil parties. That's our view, but we will of course go by whatever you decide, Mr. President. The Defense Counsel. Yes, Mr. President, it's true that we wanted to see this witness before the Chamber, but let me also remind you that this is one of the witnesses or statements that was supposed to appear on the list. That is one of the testimonies that the co-prosecutors had requested to come because not related to the acts and conduct of the accused. In such circumstances, I think that it is for the defense to take the floor last, and in the document 00917754, it seems to be laid down that the defense should come last after the co-prosecutors and the civil parties, so I maintain my request.
The President. Now, the Chamber wishes to rule on this by offering the opportunity to counsels for Mr. Kyusompon to proceed putting the question first because they are the original requesters for this witness to be heard. And indeed, there may be some issue regarding this memorandum. Nonetheless, the Chamber now wishes to hand over to counsels for Kyusompon to proceed with the questioning.
Très bien, Monsieur le Président.
Very well, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Leng Chung. My name is Anta Gise. I am the international co-lawyer for Mr. Kyusompon, and in that capacity I would like to ask you some questions about your experiences between 1975 and 1979. If any of my questions do not seem clear to you, please do not hesitate to ask me to repeat it. To begin with, can you please tell the Chamber what year you joined the revolution?
Response. I joined the revolution in late 1973.
What region were you living in at the time?
Response. I was in Takao province.
Est-ce que
Did you stay in Takao during the entire Democratic Kampuchea period, or did you leave that region?
Response. In 1976, I was sent to Phnom Penh.
When you reached Phnom Penh in 1976, where were you sent to work and by who?
Response. First, I stayed at the Khmer Soviet Technical School, and then we were split into two groups. The young people would be sent to the factories when the adults would be sent to work as drivers.
et vous-même
And what about you, Mr. Witness? Which group were you put into precisely?
Response. I was placed in the adult group.
Donc si je comprends,
So you were designated as a driver, if I understand correctly.
Response. Yes, it is correct. I was a driver.
est-ce que vous
Do you remember the name of the office you were sent to work in?
Response. It was at a K-12 office.
et
And did you become a driver immediately after your arrival in Phnom Penh, or was there a time during which you did other jobs?
Response. Before I became the driver, I was tasked with cleaning the city, and I had to dump the trashes at Steng Mien Chey dumping site.
qui était le responsable
Who was in charge of K-12 when you were there?
Response. Mill was in charge.
Combien de temps
How long did you stay in K-12 as a driver?
Response. I stayed there for a period of 2 years consecutively.
vous avez
So you told us that you started in 1976, which would mean that you stayed until 1978, is that right?
Response. Yes, it is.
et en
And then, what happened after in 1978?
Response. Then I was tasked with the driving work, and I drove for Mr. Kilsampan.
When, in 1978, did you become a driver for Mr. Kyo Sompong? Do you remember the month?
Response. I'm afraid I don't remember it precisely, but it perhaps was in August or September or November, between these 3 months time, I believe.
Et jusqu'à
And for how long did you continue to be his driver?
Response. I became his driver all the way to 1979.
Can you be a little bit more precise about when it was in 1979 that you ceased to be his driver?
Response. I became his driver in, let's say, August 1978, and I ceased to become his driver in 1979.
Yes, I did know the 1979, Mr. Witness, but can you tell us more precisely at what date you stopped, or what particular event marked the end of that job for you?
Response. I ceased to become his driver when we had to flee and we had to go climb the mountain on the run.
quand vous parlez de la
When you're talking about fleeing, are you referring to the Vietnamese arriving in Cambodia?
Response. I think it is correct. It was when the Vietnamese were coming.
Very good. Let's look a little bit more closely at the duties you fulfilled. Could you, for example, tell the Chamber what kind of vehicle you drove for Mr. Kyo Sompong?
Response. I drove a small Lambretta.
pendant la période
When you were working for Mr. Kyo Sompong, where did you live?
Response. I lived outside of his home.
hors de sa maison.
Outside his home. Well, let's start with you telling us where Mr. Kyo Sompong's house was at the time.
Response. I don't remember where it is now, but at that time he lived at K3 office. He stayed at that office, but I would live in another house which was about 10 meters away from it.
Vous avez parlé du bureau K3.
You talked about Office K3. Can you describe for the Chamber that particular office? Where was it located? How much space did it occupy? How many buildings did it comprise?
At that time, there was no building. There was only 3 flats. they blocked the road to reserve this flat as the office. They blocked the road from the road crossing Orusei Market up until behind the Royal Palace.
Dans ma traduction en français, j'entends.
In my headset, I heard that there were 3 apartments. Are you saying that there was one single building that had 3 floors? Is that the idea?
No, actually it was not 3 flats, but they blocked 3 roads or 3 sections. There were 3 roads leading to that section, but all of them were blocked except one.
I understand that in K3 there were 3 entrance routes, but can you describe more precisely for the chamber what there was on those 3 roads, and can you give us an explanation of the K3 layout?
At that place, they did not reside in each and every house, because at that time certain houses were completely abandoned and there was nothing left over there, so they only selected certain houses which were in a relatively good condition to work in.
So, from your response, I have understood that there were several houses in K3. Some of them were inhabited, others not. Do you remember how many houses there were in K3, inhabited or empty?
Well, I do not recall the number of houses in the compound. I did not even bother to count them anyway at that time.
On va essayer de faire une.
Perhaps we can make an estimate. I know we're going back quite a few years here, but let's say, were there more than 5 houses in K3?
There were approximately 20 or 30 houses. There were 3 sections in that areas, and it was about 200 to 300 meter length, and there were several houses, but some of them were deserted and others were inhabited. So those houses who were inhabited were only a few.
Very well. Let's turn our attention to the ones that were inhabited. You said that the house occupied by Mr. Kyosampan was about 10 meters away from the one that you used. Did you share your house with other people, and if so, with who?
I stayed in that place alone. I did not share with anybody.
Et la maison occupée.
And the house that Mr. Kyosampan lived in, did he share that with other people?
He stayed there alone. He did not share with anybody either.
Au sein de.
Within K3, Who else was living there in the other houses that you have described?
I do not recall them all, but there were relatively many people, some 10 to 20 people, but we got to know each other only during dining time.
Est-ce que vous...
Can you remember the names of some of the people? Maybe not all of them, but others who you personally saw living in K3.
I cannot recollect their names. It has been so many years. But if we come across each other, I would recognize them, but I have forgotten their name.
Before we continue on this point, can you just describe what Mr. Kyusampon's house was like that he had in K3?
No, I cannot describe the layout of his house because I never entered into inside the house.
Tout à l'heure, vous...
On a question from the President, you said that you remembered answering questions from the investigators from the OCIJ in 2009. So perhaps to help refresh your memory, I could take you back to that stage and read a little piece from your interview. This is document E3/385, and the piece I want to read in French is 007025543. In Khmer, it's 00357-210, and continuing on the following page, and in English it's 00360-127. With your kind leave, Mr. President, I would like the Khmer version to be put onto the screen so that the witness can follow. The part I want to read to you is down at the bottom of the page, at least in the French version, and it's the last question there. And the investigators ask you, where was the working office of Kyosampong? And you reply, Kyosampong did not really have an office, but his house was at K3. When he had work to do, he went out to work. He returned to rest at the K3 office after finishing his work. I often drove Kyosampong to his mother's house near Bangkok. His house was not a place of work. I saw only tables, a sofa for receiving guests, and there was a hammock for him to rest. He didn't have a secretary or a person to answer the phone, but there was a telephone in the house for him to use. When he went to work outside, he locked his house. So, Mr. Witness, when I read this excerpt out from your statement. Does that refresh your memory? Is this Kyo Sampon's house at K3 that you were describing in this passage?
Yes, that is correct.
Je vous remercie de cette...
Thank you for that detail. There's another point I want to take up now. You talked to us about K3, and we'll certainly come back to that. But did you also know Office K1?
Yes, I did.
Est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer...
Could you tell us what distance there was dividing K1 and K3?
I cannot be exact, but it could be around 3 to 4 kilometers away from each other.
J'en reviens maintenant plus précisément.
Coming back then to K3, you said that the house that you were living in was some 10 yards away from Kyo Sampon's. Apart from Kyo Sampon, did you know any of the other leaders? And the first part of this bigger question is, did you know Nunchea?
Yes, I did.
Quand l'avez-vous rencontré et où, s'il vous plaît?
When and where did you meet him?
I met him once in a while when he did exercise. I saw him.
Et où l'avez-vous vu exactement?
Where precisely did you see him?
I saw him at K3 when he did exercise in the evening.
Est-ce que vous savez si le...
Do you know if he had a house in K3? And how far was it from your house and from Kyo Sampon's house, if you can remember?
They were living on the other section divided by a road. So Kyo Sampon's house was on one side of the road and Nunchea's house was on the other side.
Est-ce que vous connaissez...
Did you know Yang Sari?
I did, but I merely saw him. I never talked to him personally.
Et est-ce que...
Did you see him at K3 as well?
Yes, I did see him at K3.
Et est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer...
Can you tell us how far his house in K3 was from Kyo Sampon's house and your own?
I'm afraid I do not understand your question. Could you please elaborate it?
Well, you told us that you saw Yang Sari in K3, and so my first question is, did he have a house in K3, as you recall?
Yes, he did. But to my recollection, his house was located along the blocks with that of Nuon Chea.
So therefore, on the other side of the road to Kyosampan's house, if we take account of what you were telling us before. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Et est-ce que vous connaissez
Did you know Mrs. Yang Dirit, the wife of Yang Sari? Did she live in K3?
I did not know her, and of course, she did not stay in K3.
Do you remember if you ever saw, if you saw Nuncha and Yang Sari every day when you were in K3?
I did not see him every day because I had my work to handle.
Est-ce que
Do you know if they lived in K3 with their families? You said that Yang Dirit wasn't in K3, but do you know if Yang Sari or Nuncha had other places to go apart from K3? Don't conjecture here, just tell us if you happen to know.
That I do not know.
j'en reviens maintenant
Let's come back to the question of meals. Earlier on, you told us that in K3, people congregated at meal times. Where did you have these meals?
At the kitchen of office K3.
et qui prenait
And who ate at the K3 kitchen? Everybody? Mr. Kyosampan and yourself included? Or did people eat separately from each other, depending on their rank and function?
They ate separately. They had their separate kitchen, and as for me, I had a different place to eat.
est-ce que vous connaissez
Did you know Kyosampan's wife, and did you ever see her in K3 at that time?
Yes, I did. I saw her there.
quelles étaient ses fonctions à 4 ans
What was her job in K3?
She was a cook, preparing meals for others.
est-ce que c'est
Did you take your meals in her kitchen?
No, I didn't.
avec qui partagiez-vous vos repas
So who did you eat with in those days?
We had a separate kitchen. I ate with other people. There were around 10-20 people. We ate together but separately.
Alors, vous mangez.
So you ate together but separately. Can you tell us who the 10 people were who you ate with and what their jobs were?
I'm afraid I cannot elaborate because we worked. Our nature of work was different, and I did not know them very well either.
Where did Mr. Kyosompon eat, if you can remember that?
There was a kitchen, a separate kitchen for him.
Je voudrais.
I'd like to come back to your statement E3385. In French, the ERN is 00702544. In Khmer, 00357211. And in English, 003601228. And just to refresh your memory, I'd like to read a piece out from this statement to make sure we're talking about the same thing. The question by the investigator, it's the penultimate question on the French version. Was there a meeting hall, asks the investigator, at the K3 office, which was the place where the leaders met? And your answer was there was no meeting hall there, and I never saw those leaders having a joint meeting. But there was a dining hall with a long table. So I'd like to ask you if this place that you describe in your statement was the place where Mr. Kyosompon took his meals.
Yes, you are right.
Toujours au sujet de 4.1.
Staying with K3 for the moment, you also told us that there were other people whose names you have forgotten and who were working in that office, which was a pretty large one as you describe it. Can you remember who was in charge of K3?
Yes, I recall.
Est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer son nom?
May we be enlightened.
Yeah, Sami was in charge of this office.
Et
was he your superior in K3 since he was head of that office, or were you in fact responsible to somebody else?
Back then I was under the supervision of Mr. Sami.
Et
In K3, well, you told us a moment ago when I reread that description you gave of Kirsampan's house, you said that it wasn't an office. So now can you tell us, if you know, what duties Mr. Kirsampan fulfilled in those days?
I only knew it through a radio broadcast that he was the president of a state presidium.
Et concrètement,
And to be a little more specific, you who were working for him for quite a few months, what did he actually do? What were his duties?
As for the nature of his work, I did not know that much. I only drove for him. I only dropped him at his workplace. I did not know what he did. And from the place where he worked and the place where I was waiting for him was about 50 to 100 meters away from his place, so I did not know that much.
est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer à la Chambre à quel...
Can you tell the chamber where you took Mr. Kirsampan? I am, first of all, keen to know about the trip to Phnom Penh with him. First of all, did you have to go on many trips when you were working for him?
I only drove him to K1 occasionally. It was somewhere near the Royal Palace and the former National Assembly premise.
Et lorsqu'il se déplaçait à
And when he went to K1, do you recall for how long he stayed there, that is at K1?
Response. I don't remember exactly the period of time he would stay there, but sometimes he would be there for half an hour or 1 hour before he returned.
Et est-ce que vous vous souvenez
And do you know whether during that period, while you were working for him, you went somewhere else apart from K1?
Response. I don't remember all of this because it was a long time ago.
est-ce que vous vous souvenez être allé en dehors de Phnom Penh avec
Do you remember going outside of Phnom Penh with Mr. Kirsampan?
Response. Yes, I do, on some occasions.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez combien de fois exactement?
Do you recall how many times, to be more precise?
Response: very occasionally, maybe once or twice.
Je voudrais à nouveau citer un passage de votre déclaration devant.
I would like to quote from your statement before the co-investigating judges, still the document E3/185. The ERN in French is 00702546, and the ERN in Khmer is 00357-212, and it continues on to the next page. And the ERN in English is 00360-130. With the President's leave, and this is a general request I am making when I quote from the witness's statement, may I request that it be placed on the screen. So this is the passage I would like to read out to you, and it is in French. Your answer to the fourth question, and the question put to you at the time was as follows: what did Kyo Sampan's work consist of? And this is your response: I never saw him go to a work site or to inspect the building of a dam or the digging of a canal. He went to Kandal province once and to Takeo province once. I have the impression he did not have much work to do. I knew that he was the president of the state presidium because I had heard that information on the radio and over loudspeakers. My first question to you, witness, in light of your statement, to refresh your memory, the two times you referred to a while ago in answer to my question, do they have to do with the trip to Kandal and the other trip to Takeo? Does this refresh your memory?
Response: yes, it does. It is correct.
Je voudrais également
I would also like to refer you to another passage from your statement. The ERN in French is 007025545, and the ERN in Khmer is 00357-212, and in English it is 00360-129. In French, it is the last but one answer. That's the last paragraph. And this is the question that was put to you by the investigator at the time. After you had described the trips on which you went with Mr. Kyo Sampan, he asked you, and I quote, apart from that, where else did you drive him? Your answer: I took him to visit the surroundings of Phnom Penh, but he did not alight from the car. He merely looked outside and he went to K3 office. He asked me to take him to Kandal province once to inspect floods, but he didn't go there to see anyone. He merely inspected the place. He had asked me to go to Takeo province once to inspect a dam, but since the car could not go on a road which was not motorable, we turned back and we went to visit my home in Takeo province. Apart from that, he never ordered me to visit canal building site or a dam construction site. He neither went to security centers. He did not go to security centers either. Does this refresh your memory? And are these the only trips on which you went at the time with Mr. Kyo Sampan?
Response. Although I do not remember precisely, but the accounts reflect my memory now that the occasions, the two occasions that I brought him there, I drove him there, and on one occasion we couldn't go further because the car didn't allow us to go further. We had to return.
Je voudrais une précision.
I would like you to specify, to be more specific in your statement. When you said, I took him to visit the surroundings of Phnom Penh, what do you mean exactly? Do you mean that you were outside of Phnom Penh or you were inside Phnom Penh? Can you be more specific? That is when you said in your statement that he merely looked outside and returned to K3 office. Do you recall whether such visits were inside Phnom Penh or outside of Phnom Penh?
Response. The visits were within the vicinity of Phnom Penh. It's just within the 10 kilometers, square kilometers of the vicinity of Phnom Penh.
Et vous dites qu'il restait.
And you stated that he remained sitting in the vehicle. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is. He didn't leave the car.
Et à quelle fréquence est-ce que
And how often did you go on such visits?
Response. It was very seldom.
un autre point.
Another point I would like us to talk about regarding Mr. Kyo Sampan's duties at the time is this. Do you recall whether he received foreign visitors during the period when you worked for him?
Response. No, I don't. I don't remember having seen him receiving any VIP visitors, and I was rather young at that time. I was about 15 or 16 years old.
Oui, monsieur le témoin.
Yes, witness. I asked this question because these events occurred a long time ago, and that is why I am trying to refresh your memory in light of your statement to the co-investigating judges. The document is E3/385, and the ERN in French is 007020548, and the ERN in Khmer is 003572115, and the ERN in English is 00360-132. I am particularly interested in your fourth response. And the question put to you on that occasion was as follows. Who visited Kyo Sampan? And your answer was as follows. He received visitors approximately 2 or 3 times. There were diplomats, for instance, who came to tender their letters of credence, and he met them at the Royal Palace. These meetings lasted only about half an hour. My question to you is as follows. Having read out your statement to you, is your memory refreshed now, and do you recall driving Mr. Kyo Sampan 2 or 3 times to receive letters of credence from foreign diplomats?
Response. Yes, with that statement, it refreshes my memory, and I took him there to receive them, yes.
De façon générale,
Generally speaking, apart from the few trips to K1 and the 2 trips to the provinces you refer to, that is to Kandal and Takeo, and the receipt of letters of credence, do you recall any other activities carried out by Mr. Kyo Sampan during the period when you worked for him?
Response. I don't remember having seen him performing other tasks.
à la même page que je viens de citer,
On the same page I have just cited, that is 00702-548. In Khmer, it is 00357-214, and in English it's 00360-132. The following question was put to you by the investigator when you were interviewed on that day. Question: do you think Kyo Sampan is someone powerful? And this was your response. My answer is no, because I have the impression that he did not have a lot of work to do. He spent most of the time in Phnom Penh. My question to you is as follows. Is this impression that he did not have a lot of work to do still in line with what you recall? Does it still correspond to what you remember?
Response. Yes, it does.
Est-ce que pendant la période
During the period when you worked for Mr. Kyo Sampan, do you recall accompanying him to meetings?
publique, j'entends.
By meetings, I mean public meetings, big meetings.
Response. I remember having driven him to the stadium on one occasion only.
S'agit-il du stade olympique?
Is that the Olympic Stadium in Phnom Penh?
Response. Yes, it is.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez à quel
Do you recall on what date that meeting was held and what was its purpose?
Response. I don't remember the date of the meeting, And I do not know the objective of the meeting because I was not within the vicinity where the meeting was held.
Est-ce que je dois en conclure que
Do I take it then that you did not attend that meeting?
Response. As a driver, I was not obliged to attend the meeting, and I had no right to attend such meeting either.
je voudrais à nouveau lire un passage.
I would like to read out another passage from your statement, and it is 00 E3/385. The ERN in French is 00702-545. And the ERN in Khmer is 00357-211, and it continues on to the next page. And the ERN in English is 00360-129. And this was a question that was put to you at the time. When you became Kyo Sampan's driver, where did you take him to? And your answer is as follows. In 1978, I accompanied Kyo Sampan to the Olympic Stadium to take part in a major meeting attended by cadres and workers. Kyo Sampan, Nuon Chea, and Pol Pot attended that meeting, but I did not see Son Sen. My question to you is as follows. In light of your answer, I have the impression that you attended that major meeting without fully participating in it. Did you see the participants at that meeting?
Response. I only saw them from the outside and I heard their names being pronounced on the loudspeaker because at that time I was at the car after dropping Mr. Kyo Sampan.
On a annoncé leur nom par.
Their names were announced by loudspeaker. Do you know whether Mr. Kyo Sampan made a statement on that day? Did he speak at that meeting?
Response. No, I don't. I don't remember having heard him saying anything during that day.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez?
Do you recall who presided over that big meeting?
Response. I believe it was Pol Pot who presided over that meeting.
Je vous remercie de ces précisions.
Thank you for this clarification. Apart from that meeting at the Olympic Stadium, do you recall accompanying him to another meeting?
Response. I don't remember this. Even in my statement before the investigators, I could not recollect all the detail.
Ce qui est très compréhensible, Monsieur le
Which is very understandable, witness, because Those events occurred a long time ago. I just want to refresh your memory, and I'll read out another passage from your statement. And it is still E3/385. The ERN in French is 007025546. And the ERN in Khmer is 003572113, and the ERN in English is 003603130. And in French, this is the third question and answer before the end. The question put to you on that day was as follows. To which meeting did you drive Mr. Kyosampan? And your answer in 2009 was, I took Kyosampan to big meetings twice, once to the Olympic Stadium and once to the former assembly. At the meeting at the former assembly, I saw many cards from the regions. I knew them because I had seen some of them, and the bodyguards and drivers of these cars talked to me about them. My question to you is as follows. Do you recall this second meeting, and did you attend it?
Response. I think the question is rather repetitive, and I already made myself clear. As a driver, I had no authority to be part in the meeting, either it's small or bigger. So I would say, no, I didn't attend this meeting.
Oui, parfois mes questions.
Yes, at times my questions may sound repetitive, but I'm trying to obtain clarifications from you. And I need to obtain these clarifications since your statements are before the chamber, and I crave your indulgence if you find my questions repetitive. So let me press on then. Do you know Office 870? Or did you know Office 870?
Response. I have heard of it. I don't know where it was situated.
Et est-ce que vous savez, sans savoir où il était?
And do you know who was in charge of that person without having been there yourself?
Response. I have heard that a person by the name of Pang was in charge of Office 870.
Et est-ce que vous savez jusqu'à...
And do you know up until when he performed duties at that office as head?
Response. I don't know. I don't know whether he was transferred to another place as well, but the only thing I know is that I have heard someone by the name of Pang who was in charge of that office.
Est-ce que vous connaissez un des noms?
Do you know a person by the name of Ken?
Response. Yes, I do.
Est-ce que vous savez quelle fonction il...
Do you know what duties he performed?
Response. Although I know him, but I don't know what what duties he performed.
Je voudrais citer à nouveau un passage.
I would like to cite a passage from your statement, E3/385, the ERN in French 00702-545, and the ERN in Khmer is 00357-214, and in English it is 00360-130. And the question put to you at the time by the investigator was as follows. After Pang's arrest, who took over from him? And your answer was as follows. The person called Ken came to replace him. His wife is still alive, but I do not know where she lives. My question to you is as follows. Do you now recall, now that I have refreshed your memory, whether at the time Ken replaced Pong?
Response. Yes, with that, I now remember it was Gan who came to take over from Pang, and I didn't say so at the beginning because I did not remember this. Now I remember, that's all.
Et Monsieur le témoin.
And witness, do you know a person by the name Tasot?
Response. Yes, I do.
Est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer à la Chambre
Can you tell the chamber what his duties were?
Response. I don't know what Dasot was doing, but I knew of him. I just don't know what he did.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez s'il a...
Do you know whether he worked at K12 like yourself?
Response. Yes, Tasot, as far as I remember, worked at K12, and he belonged to the drivers group, and he asked us to help clean the places. The president intervenes. Counsel and Mr. Witness, it is now appropriate moment already for adjournment. The chamber will adjourn for 20 minutes. Court officer is now directed to assist the witness during this adjournment and have him brought into the courtroom by 10 to 11. The court is adjourned.
សូមក្រោកឈរ